As medical schemes prepare for 2026, contribution increases, benefit adjustments, and member value remain key discussion points. I'm speaking to Deon Kotze, Chief Commercial Officer at Discovery Health, to share the scheme's increases, benefit design changes, and the challenges facing medical schemes in the current very interesting environment. Welcome, Deon.
Hi, Rianet, and thanks for the opportunity. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. So, Deon, please give me a high-level overview of your increases in contributions for 2026, please.
Thanks, Rianet. I guess as with any year, when we do the contribution increases, it's effectively setting the budget for 2026. So the starting point is to understand what are the expected claims that the scheme has to or will be expected to pay in 2026. And once we've kind of set that budget, that would then give us an indication of how much contributions the scheme needs to collect in order to meet that claims liability. And once that's established, that of course informs by how much we need to increase contributions. So the starting point is really understanding what is the claims budget for 2026. Now, if we think about sort of what the claims are going to be in 2026, that's informed by what we expect the increases in the claims are going to be. And those are informed by two things. Firstly, what is the price of a healthcare service? So, what is the price of a GP consult, price of one night in hospital, the price of your hypertension medication? That's the price of the healthcare service. And then the second component of that is like how many of those services will the scheme have to pay for in 2026. So the one is what we refer to as tariff increases or price increases. That's typically in line with the consumer price inflation for South Africa. So whatever kind of CPI is, that's more or less what the price of healthcare services will increase by. That's subject to the negotiation that we do with providers on behalf of the Discovery Health Medical Scheme. And then the second component is then what we refer to as utilization. So that's how much healthcare members will consume. Now that increases year on year. And it's simply a function of people getting older. And one of the unfortunate things of getting older is that you use healthcare more often. So you see the doctor more often. Another is that we see more people being diagnosed with a chronic illness. And as they get diagnosed with a chronic illness, they tend to use the healthcare services more, in particular around sort of medicine to treat their illness. And then another component is where we see the substitution of existing healthcare for another form of healthcare, often more expensive. This we typically see in the treatment of cancer, where a new oncology drug is introduced, especially in the immunological space, where the new treatment costs more than the existing treatment. So overall, that's kind of what drives the increase in claims from 2025 into 2026. We expect that to be around 7.2%. And so that informs the contribution increases then. So the weighted average contribution increase for the medical scheme is 7.2%. We've split that between the different plans just to reflect the underlying plan dynamics, and hence the increase is either 6.9% or 7.9%, depending on the plan choice of the member.
Okay, thank you for that in-depth discussion. You need to have a serious maths brain there, and I think the stats that you have can be really interesting, because how does it differ from one year to another? What have we picked up after COVID, where it was a little bit quiet and then suddenly there was a lot of things? Also, what do we see in terms of younger and older people staying off and coming off of schemes, and people living longer, right? So there's a lot of factors to take into account on top of all of that. Every year there's some nice changes, benefit enhancements, and I'm keen to hear what Discovery Health has in store, as a Discovery Health member myself, for 2026.
So I think that probably the most significant thing, Rianet, is the deferral of the contribution increase. So as we did the calculations around what we expect the changes in the claims to be, we consider kind of like, as I said, the increase in the claims from one year to the next, and we also consider kind of how that affects the sustainability of the medical scheme. Sustainability of medical schemes, as advisors would well know, is a function not just of the growth of the medical scheme or the levels of the contributions, but also of the financial strength of the schemes, in particular around how much they have in reserves. Unfortunately, not too long ago, we lived through the demise of Health Squared, and there are some schemes that are currently under the regulated solvency levels. For Discovery Health Medical Scheme, for the benefit of members, the scheme is in a very strong financial position. So we currently exceed that 25% minimum regulated solvency level. We're projecting to end the year off at close to 32%, 31.8%. And when we worked out kind of what the contribution increase is, what was apparent was that there is sufficient reserves that we can actually defer that contribution increase. So effectively, the members' contributions won't increase on the 1st of January. It will only increase on the 1st of April. So members will continue to pay their contributions for 2025 for the first 3 months of next year. Even though we changed the benefits on the 1st of January, they'll continue to pay 2025 contributions, and then only on the 1st of April 2026 will be increased contributions. Now, the value of that deferral is about 1.5 billion rand. So effectively, members benefit from that because that's the reserves being used for their benefit. But what they also know is that the contributions on the 1st of April will be at the correct level, so they don't have to worry about like high contribution increases in future to make up for that, because it's kind of
feels like there's always a catch with something like that, right?
But sustainable, because the what we don't want to do is, and many advisors ask me this question, it's like, why don't you just give members like a low increase instead of deferring the contribution increase? The problem with the low increase is that at some point you have to get the contributions in line with the claims, which means you can take a low increase this year, but then you have to take a higher increase in the following year. And we'd rather kind of keep those contribution increases stable over time. So that's I would say that's probably the most significant benefit for members. From an advice perspective for advisors, I think probably one of the most exciting things that we've done is the introduction of a new plan series called the Smart Saver series. Now, over the last couple of years, we've embarked on what we call listening sessions with brokers, where we've sat down, we've listened kind of to their feedback in terms of how the product is performing, how that affects their advice, what the competition, how are we stacked up from a competitive perspective. And one of the things that we've particularly asked about is how do medical schemes give value to younger members? Because we all know that if you look at sort of the age profile of medical schemes, in that age gap from 20 to 40, there's like an underrepresentation of members. And we all understand that's because, people are buying homes for the first time, they're buying cars for the first time, starting work for the first time, they're starting families. There's lots of competing priorities in their budget. And so our argument is that people at those ages, it's not as though their healthcare isn't important to them, but I guess it's important for them to understand what do they get in return for the contribution that they're paying. So a huge focus on value. The launch of the Active Smart Plan at the beginning of this year was specifically focused on young professionals. And the growth in that plan has exceeded our expectations. So the plan already, Active Smart, already has more than 22,000 members. It's already producing new business where 80% of new business is below the age of 40. And so that's very beneficial to the scheme. So this year, the focus was on young families then, in terms of understanding their needs, and an analysis of those needs showed a few things which come up when young families are being advised about healthcare cover. The first being they have a need for unlimited hospital cover. And the importance of the unlimited hospital cover is because no one's immune to hospitalization as a result of an emergency. So all young families require that. So unlimited hospital cover was important. The second feature is then how do they prioritize their day-to-day covers? Now, if we look at the claims, and many advisors would understand this very well, is that most people use their day-to-day benefits for visits to the pharmacy or visits to the GP, right?
Yes.
And that's not because they want to go, it's because they have to go. But they want to make sure that we want to make sure that when you need to use that service, you've got funds available. So we've designed a benefit that's risk funded for your GP visits and your medicine. And then there's an MSA component that you can then prioritize for everything else. So your GP visit and your medicine benefit is medicine is not paid from your medical savings account, it's paid from risk. And then you have a medical savings account, which you can then use as a family to prioritize whatever else is important for your family. So it's kind of a hospital benefit that gives you absolute certainty of cover in the case of emergencies. And then day-to-day benefits that are designed around sort of the flexibility, but also the certainty of needs that young families have. And that's kind of I would say from an advice perspective, probably the most significant thing that we've done for 2026 in terms of creating optionality around young families.
No, that's very exciting. Well done for listening to the broker and to the clients. Yeah.
Very important.
With everything else, there's always challenges. Yeah. So what do you think is the biggest challenges? And you're more than welcome to include NHI in your comments.
Rianet, I would say, the biggest challenge facing medical schemes at the moment is medical inflation. And the reason why I say that is because, healthcare is important for people, but so is many other things, right? And so kind of the affordability of cover is, in the context of the increasing contributions, is probably the biggest challenge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of things that influence that, and it's our ability to manage that is probably our biggest challenge. We've got a lot of people focusing very clearly on each one of those different elements in very granular fashion, ensuring that we get the best price, ensuring that price, the price that we pay, doesn't compromise outcomes for members. Because, what we can't do is just get the cheapest option, but then when the cheapest option gives you the poorest outcomes, that doesn't really help. So you've got to kind of strike that balance between what the right price is for a healthcare service and but optimizing the outcome at that price. And then the other part is the demographic risk. In an environment with incomplete regulation where it's not compulsory to be on a medical scheme, you've got very expensive prescribed minimum benefits, risk rating, community rating, and then limited underwriting. Schemes are very exposed to selection risk. And so managing that demographic risk is really important. So it's important, I think, for advisors to understand is that as much as kind of the program that we introduced into Discovery Health Medical Scheme, Personal Health Pathways, is exciting for members to use because they get rewards out of it, they can earn benefits out of it. It's as important to the long-term sustainability of the scheme and kind of managing that demographic risk. I've heard many advisors over the year end advising that their target is to get 100% of their clients to actually sign up for Personal Health Pathways and use it because it's valuable to the client, but for the long-term sustainability of Discovery Health Medical Scheme, it's equally important. On NHI, it remains challenging in terms of the regulation, the act as it is written. But as we all know, that is subject to legal challenges, and it's important kind of for advisors to understand that those legal challenges are not in opposition to the concept of universal healthcare, because that's important. I think we all, any advisor would want to kind of advise 100% of our population on accessible and affordable healthcare cover instead of just 15%. But we've got to do that in a sustainable way. And so the subject of the legal challenges really is to ensure that we end up in a world which is sustainable and affordable and accessible for everyone. I do think, though, that the medical inflation challenge is probably the biggest one that the schemes face in the shorter term.
Yeah, I think it's one of the comments. Most of the people that I had a chat with have mentioned that as the number one risk and challenge. So most certainly. I think lastly, audience, our audience is the advisors, the brokers, your
Yes.
message to them?
I mean, as I say to all advisors, we appreciate the support for the products that we have. But more than that, I guess the independent advice that they give to clients. I often get asked by people, what should I do? Because I'm not sure about my plan, I'm not sure about my cover, etc. And the first thing I would say is kind of speak to an advisor, speak to an advisor, because and specifically, I'm very thankful for advisors to take like a holistic view to kind of their clients' needs, not just advise them on medical scheme. One thing I always ask people, that tell me they're considering downgrading their cover. I say to them always, when you speak to your advisor about it, please ensure that you ask them about critical illness cover. On the life insurance side, because you don't want to be in a position where you've downgraded your cover, something unforeseen happens, and you're left kind of with this big shortfall. So I think thankful for the support, but even more thankful for the advice that they're providing. And then the other thing I would ask is keep providing us with feedback on the products. We really want to listen. We can't always kind of do everything that everybody wants, but we certainly want to kind of hear the feedback, especially where they feel there are gaps in the product range, that are not meeting needs that are articulated by their clients, because that's where kind of I think we can really help in terms of creating a product or creating cover which meets those unmet needs.
Yeah, and it's something that it seems like you've been doing really well, having those conversations. So yeah, I think critical. Thank you for your time, Deon. That was very insightful. Enjoyed the conversation, and all the best for this last stretch.
Thank you, Rianet, and the same to the audience as well. I know it's a busy time of the year as it comes to the advice around medical schemes. Maybe something that, if I could, just an important point, because I did mention that we're deferring the contribution increase. It's probably just worth for advisors to reiterate. We're doing it in all the communication, but typically members have the option to upgrade on the 1st of January, which they still do, but because we're deferring the contribution increases, members will again have the option on the 1st of April. So I think for advisors, it's just worth bearing in mind that they'll have two opportunities to advise their clients around upgrades on Discovery Health Medical Scheme, 1 January and again 1 April. But otherwise, all the best for the year end. So